Okay, so I thought I would share my free-range diet polyculture for a Clydesdale. This is actually an assignment I had to do recently for one of my permaculture classes through Cornell University. And I wanted to show what I came up with because as a graphic designer, I can't help myself and I have to illustrate everything. So here we have a Clydesdale. What I'm interested in doing is creating a diet that helps me to ease my reliance on hay, not just in the winter, but also in the summertime. And the way that I do that is through forageable cover crops. So first, let's talk about inputs. At the top of the screen, you'll see two maps. One is blue, one is red. This is an overhead or a bird's eye view of my property. Okay, so the shaded areas are where I would sow seed, cover crop seed to be specific, for the Clydesdales to forage. So we have the blue, which is a cold season sowing. We have the red, which is a warm season sowing. Down here, I get very specific about the cover crops that I'm interested in planting. Reason being, I'm not interested in just meeting the crude protein and calorie needs for my horses. What I'm interested in also doing is choosing cover crops that can help with soil compaction, fertility, general tilth, that sort of thing. And so I'm sort of stacking functions here. Okay, so I'm feeding my animals, sheep included, reducing reliance on hay, but then I'm also interested in improving my soil. So for the cold season cover crops, I'm choosing forage turnip, triticale, and berseem clover. And I've broken it down into what they do for the soil. This information is taken from the cover crops chart from the Rodale Institute, an amazing resource. It's free. I would definitely look it up because you want to find crops that, yes, like I said, meet the calorie requirements of your animals, but if you're trying to improve soil health, we all have different things. So for example, the forage turnip here is going to break compacted soil, but also helps with weed suppression and attracts beneficial insects, and of course the animals eat it. Triticale, take up and hold soluble nitrogen, helps with weed suppression, and it mellows topsoil. Mellow meaning like it improves tilth. It improves like a light, fluffy texture. And that's also good for water absorbency and drainage and that sort of thing. Berseem clover is going to help fix nitrogen. The clover family is really great for weed suppression, works as a great ground cover. It's going to mellow topsoil. This is going to increase phosphorus. I mentioned nitrogen. It's going to harbor beneficial insects. So that is very exciting. One of the things that the clovers do, and I think it's the berseem clover in specific, it doesn't contain the same level of mycotoxins as other clovers do for horses. Some clovers, when the horses eat it, it's not necessarily that it's toxic, it just makes them salivate a lot. Berseem clover has less of that fungal growth, so it reduces the amount of saliva. So these are the things that the cold crops do for the animals. So the forage turnip, it's palatable to the sheep. The horses will eat it last, so this allows the root to really grow. And we talked about how the forage turnip is going to help to loosen soil sublayers. It's low in sugar, low calories, it's got a lot of vitamins, and it's good crude protein. Triticale is palatable to both sheep and horses, high in protein. But what most people don't realize about triticale is you can dry it and bale it. And then also if you do just let it go to seed in the field, your poultry will love that. So that works perfectly for my rotational grazing plan of horses to sheep to poultry. And then back to the berseem clover, we talked about the mycotoxins, but it's good protein, nitrogen, has a good flavor, good source of energy for sheep as well as the horses. And then it also meets some of the requirements for calcium to phosphorus ratios. It's important to note that when looking for a diet that would support my animals in the cold and warm seasons, I need something that's going to meet their workload demand, which is light to moderate. I'm not working my horses every day. If you were working your horses every day or demanding they plow or pull every day, you would obviously need to increase your calorie. For the warm season, forage radish this time as opposed to the turnip, crimson clover instead of the berseem, little barley, and cowpea. And these are all of the things that you can see here that they do for the animals in terms of energy and nutrients. But then down here, I have all of the things that they do for the actual soil. So just like with the turnip, the radish is going to help to break compacted soil, weed suppression, attract insects. The clover is going to take up and hold soluble nitrogen, but it also fixes nitrogen. It's going to harbor beneficial insects. It's going to increase phosphorus and do weed suppression. Little barley also helps with weed suppression, but again, it mellows out that topsoil, so it's going to help to gain a light and fluffy weight and texture. And then the cowpeas, because they're a legume, they're going to fix nitrogen. They're going to help with weeds, potassium, mellowing the topsoil, and then, of course, beneficial insects. And you can read here very quickly all of the different things that they do with regard to contribution of nutrients on behalf of the animal. But one thing, we're not just thinking about, yes, obviously we're thinking about horses, but we're thinking about everybody else that eats in the field. So that includes sheep, it includes the poultry, and then also it includes like wildlife, right? Because we're going to have deer passing through, we're going to have gopher, honeybees, and turns out crimson clover is a favorite of that. Now, we wouldn't want to turn the animals out to feed on the crimson clover after it's gone to seed head. It's actually not good for them. But until those red seed heads form, that flowers, they can go ahead and graze on the green forage. In looking at a polyculture, we're not just interested in what we're feeding them, we're interested in the animal component as well. So you hear me say it all the time. Sheep, as they graze, ingest the parasites that affect the horses, and the horses do the same for the sheep. And so we're sort of crossing out a lot of species-specific parasites, which I think is really important. But also, after the sheep go through, right, so we have sheep manure output, we have horse manure output, the birds come in. So we have ducks, geese, and guineas, and not only are they going in and sort of picking through the manure piles looking for insects, but then they're also ingesting parasites that have been left over. So that also helps to reduce the parasite load. With ducks, their bills are going to aerate the soil. They're going to fertilize as they go. They reduce some of the ticks that infect the livestock. The geese are going to graze cover crops that are left behind by the sheep and the horses. They're going to fertilize with their droppings as they go, but also what's really cool is that they protect sort of their flock as alarm bells. They have a watchdog ability. And then the guineas, they lightly scratch the soil, just the top layer as they're looking for insects, which helps to mellow out that topsoil a bit. We're not tilling at all. We're not going inches deep. It's just a nice little fluffing on the surface, and then they fertilize with their droppings as they go, but they really seek out the ticks, and that's going to help all of the animals involved in the system. The draft horse, what they contribute to the soil, they're not just taking nutrients through their forage. As they go, they obviously create manure, and that returns nutrients to the soil. I can compost that and put that that organic matter and those nutrients into growing spaces. But also, if you look at the hoof print, when they walk, that's going to make an indentation, which some would argue, well, that's just compacting the soil. But actually, if you have all these other animals, specifically the flock going through afterward, they help to loosen that back up. But those indentations create great little seed pockets, little indentations in the topsoil that are perfect for seeds and holding moisture, and that helps to increase germination. But also they trample cover crops as they go. So while they do feed on some, obviously they are walking, and when they knock back or trample those cover crops, it creates organic matter, a nice natural mulch that as it decomposes, it returns nutrients to the soil. Let's talk about, we have to consider, what do we get out of the Clydesdale? Well, I use them for pulling. Each horse, each mature Clydesdale can pull 2,000 to 8,000 pounds per horse. So that's huge here on the farm. I can also ride them. The other thing is that if there's an applicable country, they could be a source of meat. Their income by way of breeding, selling composted manure, offering lessons, and mowing, right? Because they're going to help us to mow back our lawns and our grazing spaces, and they help clear brushy landscapes as needed. And then if you're interested in using shed hair, their winter coats, when they're shed, that's what's used for making paintbrushes. So we can get a lot of utility from the horse, not to mention the fact that if you're into eating animal products, that's where gelatin comes from, that's where collagen comes from. It's all of that connective tissue, and also from hoof tissue. So I just wanted to share this. My graphic design skills got the best of me, and I thought maybe it could help somebody else out there who's interested in creating a polyculture for their Clydesdale or draft horse species.